Alright guys, welcome back to another video. This is going to be the second in a series of, I don't know how many, I might do things beyond instance content afterwards, but this is the second of kind of, I would say, three very tied together videos, and that's tier lists on the instance endgame content in Guild Wars 2. And as it stands, raids are actually my favorite of the three so far, being Fractals, Strikes, and Raids, because they provide a really good balance in my opinion, of repeatability or replayability, difficulty, fun, and story. And I think that those are all really key in creating a really strong piece of content overall. And this is off the back of Janthier Wilds being announced to have its own raid wing. So this is going to be really exciting to see how it stacks up with some of its competitor wings. Um, I think the raid wings are actually some of ArenaNet's strongest content they've ever put into the game. And so hopefully it's going to be towards the good and enjoyable tier, and one man can dream that it's base or peak, but I'm not too sure with the current state of instance endgame content that ArenaNet has released. And if you saw my Fractal video, you would know all about that. But with that being said, I'm going to get into a tier list of all the different raid bosses, and then at the end, I'm going to go back and do CMs as well. And so stick around for that if you have any opinions on the hardest of the raids overall. So I have these sequenced in their chronological order, and I thought that'd be a really good way to go about it because that's the way I experience them. And this isn't going to be like a difficulty tier list or anything. It's going to be mostly just enjoyability. But of course, when it comes to enjoyability, difficulty of the encounter plays very heavily into that. So we're starting off really strong here. Veil Guardian is probably the raid boss I'm most nostalgic for. Um, it's just got like the perfect setup for a new player to get into raids because, as we know, it's a relatively simplistic boss and it has a couple of very key mechanics that are quite challenging and punishing for a new player. Um, but it also like feeds them to you very slowly and very digestibly. Hmm. It's very digestible in the mechanics that it presents because when you think about the primary mechanics of Veil Guardian, the splitting of the Guardians at 66 and 33%, the blue teleportation circles, the green explosion circles if you don't stand in them, um, and even the CC of the Veil Guardian itself. For an introductory raid boss, these are the most important and the most damaging. Um, well, I guess Seekers as well should go into that category. These are very important mechanics, and I think Veil Guardian hand feeds you these so well because you literally have to get through every single Guardian to get to the Veil Guardian, and every single one has their own unique, mechanic that they present. One does Seekers, and one does the blue teleportation circle, and one does the green. And guess what? It's so easy to understand that it's literally color coded. Like it's incredible design. I think it's been really extremely power crept, but I think in a relatively good way. When you think about the strategies that people use for Veil Guardian nowadays, you have things like mid tanking or side tanking. They really increase the damage pressure actually, and you might not notice that because your healers are really strong nowadays, but it adds a little bit of complexity to a healer's playstyle because they have to play around the burst damage. Maybe this is kind of a weird comparison, but to me it almost feels like a very precursor form of Temple of Phoebe CM's last 10%, where you get those massive spikes of damage pressure, and that's what I kind of feel like the green explosions are akin to when you do something like side tanking, where you know you're going to be skipping the greens. I think Veil Guardian is a great example of something that has gotten power crept, but is still incredibly strong because of its core fundamental design. And I think we're going to see directly after the opposite of that. And so for now, I think Veil Guardian is going to go in my good and enjoyable tier. It's going to be the peak of this. And this is a raid that I really thoroughly enjoy. So Gorsival, as I mentioned before, it's kind of a boss that has been power crept in a much more negative way. So when you think about the core mechanics of Gorsival, you think the spirit splitting, you think um, the retaliation on CC phase, and you think the damage pressure where if you're not going to hit the DPS check, you're going to have to break a wall and glide out of the island. I've been raiding for years, and the last time I saw a squad actually miss the DPS check was 4 years ago. And that's not like me just shitting on them. Like 4 years ago was like the last time that 10 people who were semi trying had the opportunity to not make the damage check. Like, it's actually laughable how much the average squad has blown past the DPS requirement, which is really sad because people would try really hard back when this raid came out and they would not be able to make the DPS check. And so it's kind of a great way to see how far the power creeping has gone. The boss is okay. If you're a DPS player, it kind of just feels like a damage golem, a DPS golem. And if you're a healer, it's essentially a heal golem, and then when the retaliation is up, you have to pay a little more attention to your players. The the eggs are a non-factor. It's like one small dodge. It's not really fun or interactive. The spirit splitting would be fun, but you kind of just cheese it with immobilizing. And so I think the initial strategy people had was to take the 10 people and split them into 4 groups and just burst the ghost down. But now it's just you bring a druid or two, you immobilize everything, and it's kind of just like a wasted time where you get to refresh your abilities and auto attack the ghost down. So I'm not a big fan of Gorseval. I think the lore is pretty cool with the spirits. I think the infusion is awesome. It's one of my favorite infusions in the game. It's very easily accessible. It's a really nice reward because it's relatively common for new players to get, and it's also a pretty meaty gold drop. And so if a new player gets it, they can either put it on because it's a really cool looking reward, or they can sell it and get some pretty decent change to maybe get another exotic set. So um, I'll put kind of a drag for now. That might be a little harsh, and I might bring it up to all right, but I don't know. To me, Gorseval is the antithesis of Veil Guardian when it comes to power creep because its mechanics are just completely ignored nowadays, which is really sad. Sabbatha is one of the bosses that I really enjoy for the fact that it makes DPS players do a mechanic, and most DPS players loathe doing mechanics, and that is cannons with Sabbatha. Now, I know a lot of people will say that you can do, your quickness DPS, maybe you have a Boon Herald who overloads your team with quickness and then goes off to do cannons, but I've had the best experience with just DPS learning to do cannons, and then it's relatively quicker. If you have someone who's not named Harold, their boons are going to probably fall off when they come back. Um, and also, it's just good to have DPS who are like getting into it and learning how to do cannons. I don't know. I thoroughly enjoy that. I think that really raises the stock of this raid. One thing that kind of lowers it is that when you're not seeing one of what is it, maybe 2 mechanics, Flame Wall, and then Sabbath of Shadow Stepping and bringing in an ad, she's kind of a DPS golem too. I think Flak is really interesting. It's kind of a precursor to hand kiting, and I thoroughly enjoy that. It's another unique mechanic that adds a role to the boss that isn't just a tank, and I really enjoy that. And also, the progression of damage on the platform is a really unique way to make mechanics important, and that's why you'll see even today the average pug group will not skip cannons, even though they maybe could, because things would just get incredibly chaotic with all the different AOE's and the damage to the platform. You also see things like heavy bombs and the rifle turrets that show up that add a lot of complexity because you start to have these mini choices that you have to make every couple of seconds. Do I want to just keep pumping on the boss, or do I want to go kick that bomb off? Or do I want to cleave the turret with the boss? I really enjoy it, and so for that reason, I think Sabbath is going to go. So I like the mechanic of the cannon, but I'm not a fan of her DPS golem nature otherwise. So I think I'm going to keep her in all right for now, but we can definitely revisit that as well. Slothazor is kind of like the best and the worst of raids for me. I really enjoy all the complexity it adds with another mechanism where DPS have to do something, which is shroom eating, and also having to do ad control with the slublings, or else you have a lot of damage pressure. Having to do poisons, which adds another complexity for DPS because they could be one of the randoms who get it. You'll notice eventually that I really enjoy when DPS players have to do things that aren't DPS because a raid fight isn't just damage. And I think that when we get into strikes, we'll realize that as we talk about them. But I really enjoy when DPS players have to do other mechanics and movement and where your positioning in a fight is important. And so for that reason, I think Sloth is really cool. However, my biggest pet peeve in this game is when a boss has like a 10-second invulnerability, like animation. It just feels like so bad when you get in a group that is decent. Because ultimately with Sloth, if you're in a decent group, you're bursting the boss so hard that the time between CC phases is like 20 seconds. and the time to CC the boss is actually shorter than the animation itself. And so it kind of just feels like you're going through the motions. And this is especially noticeable in fights like Freinir of Jormag, where the boss just gets bursted down so hard and you have to wait for the ice guy to come out and do his little twirl, and that's really annoying. Sloth isn't nearly this bad, but to me, that really definitely not takes it down a notch. But I think just the complexity of everything happening at once, and just the idea of this massive. Can we talk about like the ideal of this fight is you have this sloth who just got hyped up on Bloodstone, and now he's just chilling in a cave, and we come like kill him, and then you eat these magic mushrooms and turn into us. Like how if we just like think about the idea of this raid on paper, imagine the ANET dev room trying to come up with a fight and what conversations led them to this. Because I can't. I don't know where they got this from, but I love it. Because you look at Matthias, and that's a much more believable like priest, white mantle guy is sacrificing people, gets hyped up on Bloodstone, but like Bloodstone Sloth, that's kind of dope. So, and also it drops the number one item in the game, and that's the hammer, the mushroom hammer. So for that, if we were just talking about drops, like this is definitely peak tier. Um, I think I still have to put it in good, below VG, but um, if it weren't for the frequent long invulnerability animations, it might be, based tier, but I love this raid a lot. It's really cool. Matthias has the same issue with the invulnerability when he transitions from, I guess, normal crazy guy to big crazy guy. I really enjoy having to bring a new mechanic into the fight, which is reflections. However, it is kind of skirted nowadays because the best DPS on the fight, or one of the better DPS on the fight, Virtuoso, can just slot it in for free. But it was cool when you had to bring like chronomancers or guardians with wall of reflection. I like the different mechanisms that come into play as well, having to do both the poison circle of Slothazor, but also the corruption of. Was this the first time that was ever shown? I don't think it was, but I can't remember what else was the precursor to that. Um, it reminds me of Twisted Castle, but I know that that is different because that actually comes after. So I enjoyed the calamity of it all. I'm not a big fan of how they incorporated environmental dangers, like how there's just like a random ghost that'll run through or an ice storm. I wish it was a little more interactive instead of just like if you stand in the circle, you're gonna feel pain for like 30 seconds and you're gonna have to deal with being chilled unless your team brings resolution. I don't know how they could have done it better, but it doesn't feel very good to me because then it just kind of becomes a bullet hell. But I guess that's part of the complexity of the fight, so can't knock it too hard. Um, the sacrifice is great. We'll see it again in Samrog, but I think it might actually be done better here because if you do not CC that shard, they will die. And if you keep just Unga Bunga pumping, they will also die because you're going to kill them. And that kind of is reminiscent of the Slubling as well. So you see how these mechanisms all kind of build on each other. I can't give Matthias anything below all right. For some reason, I just don't necessarily enjoy it every time I play it. But on paper, this boss is a really good accumulation of really unique mechanics that you don't necessarily see elsewhere. Damage and vulnerability, unless you reflect projectiles, is really cool and adds a lot of nuance. Having both poison circles that can block off areas, but also corruption where you need to get into certain areas is also really cool because it creates this internal debate of I want to get this shit as far away from the group as possible, but I also don't want to block them fountains, which is, an interesting choice, even though you can probably just nestle them between, but unimportant. And there is something to say about the skill of having to learn your movement while you're in the fight, because if you don't, an ice storm or a ghost is going to come run through and just like demolish you. And also, there's the spreading mechanic. I think that's the first time it shows in raids, besides I guess the flak bomb from Sabbatha. Um, so yeah, I think these guys are both going to be top of all right. They bring a lot of really interesting mechanics, and even though they're like fundamentally not similar as fights, they kind of evoke the same vibe for me. So yeah, we'll stick with that. Okay, this is going to be controversial. I do not like Keep Construct. I hate what it has become in current day, and I know that's not fair to judge a boss's design as it was intended versus the current interpretation or how it's done currently because power creep has completely reshaped most fights in this game. But every single pug run is just, oh, sorry if you heard that. It's just bring the KC to a tower, burst the shit out of it until your first split phase, you stand in your green circles and the dude hits one rift with the ball and then hits it out. And power creep means that you can just burst the boss down to 66, and then you just do the ball phase and then you repeat over and over again because the boss doesn't really like necessarily get crazy much harder the lower HP it gets. Um, the CM, I'll just spoil this now. The CM also doesn't add very much to it. It increases the stats and it adds a ring outside of the arena. But there is a reason that most people doing pug runs will just slip it on, even if people don't really know what the CM does. It's because it's fundamentally like the same fight, and not in the way that Karen is, where it adds a quite unique layer of complexity. It's just like, don't go in the red, and otherwise it's the same fight. So I'm not a really big fan of KC. I think it's a drag. I know that it was a cool design when it came out, and there's a lot of really cool mechanics that we don't get to see, like the splitting ghosts or whatever with the different colors and large AOE spreads. I don't know, dude. I just don't like this fight at all, and that could just be me, but yeah. Zera, I know, is controversial. I know people love Zera. People think Zera's like goated boss tier. I don't I don't know if I'm so sure though. There's a lot of preambles and side events in this fight that kind of detract it for me, because when you think about the actual boss fight that isn't just the puzzles, and you might have an issue with separating the boss fight from the puzzles there, but when you think about the beginning, when you have to hit the shit into the rifts and then kill the crystal and then have people standing on the buttons, cool, and then kill the crystal, and then when you split phase, you have to go fly on to the other platforms and kill the crystal, or you'll be portaled out and have to do either of the two preamble fights over again before you get to the boss again. These are fundamentally interesting mechanics, interesting events. However, when you think of a raid fight, I don't know. I'm not so convinced that I want fun mechanics that are away from the boss. I want a boss that kind of brings fun mechanics into the fight itself. An example of this to me would be, which one do I want to use? I like I kind of like how Deimos does it. And I know that maybe they're a little bit different in that, but Deimos has certain mechanics like oil, like prides, like spectral tears, like hands, things that happen while you're fighting the boss. And so there's this really interesting um, dynamic, and same with the Sol Green portals where you're taken to the underworld, because the boss doesn't just go away when that happens. You are removing players from the arena, and then the people who are left over have to survive without that many people. And that's a really fun mechanic because the boss is always there. You are always still in the fight. When it comes to Zera, the danger isn't necessarily there. I mean, I get when you're in the second part of the fight and people get teleported away from the boss, maybe, but she doesn't really do any like crazy mechanics besides maybe harnessing ancient energy one time, which is, oh my god, like what a non-mechanic that is. It's either you press the button or you die, and like I guess that's like, oh my god, very punishing, but that's not like eat the mushroom and clear the poison or you die. It's like press this one button or you die, and to me that's just less fun. I don't know. So this is controversial. I know this is controversial because I've seen online discussions and other tier list people were like, "Oh, this is the most goated fight. It's designed really cool," and it is. Like, it's a cool fight. Like, it's definitely like up there. But like, I don't. And I even this is crazy. Like, you can't justify this. I would say this is still like above average fight, but I'm putting it all right, I think. Cairn is, I would say, alongside Guardian, one of the best introductory raids. Um, Wing 4 is also like just my favorite wing in general and my favorite Guild Wars 2 content, I would say. So these might be overinflated because of my nostalgia and positive views of them as fights, but Cairn is a great introduction, I would say, both to normal mode and to CM mode. Um, and I'll get into the CM later, but for normal mode, I just enjoy the fact that your mechanics and your choices have very real ramifications on your teammates. If you have agony, you are going to give your team agony if you don't get off of them. And if you don't get off of them and they get agony, that's going to spread and spread. But there are also mechanics in the fight where you might have to butt up with your teammates to get into the same celestial circle. So are you going to stomach taking the ability and just tanking it, or are you going to have to get into the same celestial circle as your teammate and find a way to heal or maneuver so that they don't instantly get agony and die as well. I also like it's an interesting dynamic. I'm not sure if I'm in love with it, but instead of movement being integral to the fight itself and how you move, movement is instead integral to this fight on how you don't move because the more you move, the more agony you get. And it's a balance to play for people who are kind of hyperactive Guild Wars 2 players, as I would say, who are always moving about. I think virtuosos are the definitely the biggest example of this in my experience. They're always running around because they have like a 2 button rotation. I'm so envious because I play Conde Smith mostly. So I think Karen is definitely like good or enjoyable. It's always fast paced. It's always a cluster. Most groups don't really have a strong fundamental grasp on all the mechanics, or at least strong enough to not have those moments where like 3 or 4 people will die out of nowhere during the fight. It's always a fun fight for me. It might be the most simple raid boss, but I enjoy it. Actually, you know what? It's not the most simple raid boss because that's Mersad Overseer. This boss, rightfully so, gets the reputation of being a DPS golem because it kind of is. If you're a DPS player, like the extent of your mechanics are to move out of red and cleave other enemy while you hit the boss. The boss doesn't really have strong mechanics itself. It kind of just like stands there and does a little damage. But like how boring. I really enjoy the 3 roles that you have to have. It brings a unique responsibility to the group. And it definitely adds a layer of complexity for sure. Spikes and the damaging auras are cool. Movement in the game being an important mechanic is very cool because it adds something beyond just hit the boss. Um, but I don't know. Um, Relatively boring fight. Decent complexity. It kind of becomes a little dance to play once you get good at the fight, just knowing where to stand, etc. When I think about Mersad Overseer, am I enjoying this more than Zera? I think I enjoy it more than Zera because it's quicker, and that might not be fair, but I think I'll put it. Ooh, it's one of these two. It's not above Sabbatha. I'll put it. I'll put it above Matthias, and I know that's controversial. Man, this might just be like the shittiest tier list if you're a normal person, because I feel like cumulatively these are some weird choices to make. But anyways, Samurag, dude, I love Samurag. Okay, the lore of it all. This dude was a prisoner at the prison, and he was the warden, and then he like I don't know murdered everyone because they were rioting because he was a little goody two shoes for the Mersats in the jail. Like that's kind of weird and cool. And he's got these massive spikes and in this incredible design, which like never came back, which I'm so sad about, unless you count like the Cryptus recoloring or whatever. But I love Samurag. I love the ad phase. I think it's really well done. I love the arena removal from the spears. Even if it's not really that important, it becomes important during CM. Um, I will say, I think that Matthias does the CC phase better than Samurag does, even though they're pretty similar. And I do think, hmm, no, you know what? Let me retract that. I really enjoy. I'm retracting what I didn't even say, so you don't even know what I mean. But I was about to say that I'm not so sure I like his attacks and his attack chain, but I actually thoroughly enjoy it because it rewards good movement during your rotation. If you're a Giga gamer and you can like jump or dodge mid rotation, this boss has like very little kill pressure on you. But if you're one of those guys who gets glued to your keyboard and doesn't really look at what the boss is doing, you are going to feel the pain because it's not just like a damaging aura or auto attack you'll feel. You will be swept away into the spikes. You will be knocked down by the shockwave. Um, you'll get caught in his dash, stuff like that. I like the friend mechanic too. Like the inverse spread kind of thing where everyone else spreads, but you and your buddy get real close. Um, Yeah, you know what? I like this fight a lot. I love Wing 4. Let's go, baby. Deimos, guys, do I even have to say it? This is immediate peak tier. Deimos is an incredible accumulation of lots of really cool mechanics. It has specialized roles, in hand kiting and potentially oil kiting if you so desire. It has lots of different mechanics for players to do who are DPS especially, um, including spectral tears, watching out for prides, because you want to protect Saul. Focusing a non-boss enemy with Saul. the evil version of Saul, which is really interesting and something I wish other fights would incorporate more. Where you have this choice to make: do I continue to grind down Deimos and just suffer this other pest hitting me, or do I kill Saul at the expense of a little bit of time not spent on Deimos? I think that's really cool. The thematic design is incredible. The music is awesome. The storyline is just so cool. Um, the attacks also similar to Samurag reward good movement, um, and it is a responsibility of the entire team to watch out for oils and make it to the ward for Mind Crush, or if you're on CM, to have people who can provide Aegis, which a shocking number of classes can, and people don't realize. Let's see, Necros can, um, Mesmers can, Warriors can, Rangers can, Guardians can, Revenants can, and I think of the DPS classes who can provide group alacrity without much of a hit, you have Rangers, Guardians, um, I think Warriors too, because if like you're playing Spellbreaker, your elite skill is not that important. Or no, it's not your elite that gives, it's your Aegis banner. But you get what I mean. It it is really something where you need to help your team a little bit if you're on the CM, and that's really cool. And it kind of gets DPS players out of the mentality where they're just like, I me see snow crows, me copy snow crows, which definitely cool. I love Stamos. This is like one of my favorite fights in the game. So if you got a differing opinion, comment it down below. Let's have a little debate. Love this boss so much. Soulless Horror. No, you know what? It's good. It has all the characteristics of fights that I enjoy. It rewards good movement with the walls. It has specialized roles because you need a pusher, you need two tanks, and so add some complexity there. You definitely need to watch out for other ads and cleave them, though it's kind of trivialized by things like Virtuoso just cleaving anyway. But um, the worms, if you don't cleave them, are going to gunk up the arena. If you play the CM, it's got a really cool mechanic of actually reducing your ability to move around because the arena gets physically smaller, and I love that as a design choice. The boss is actually pretty threatening too, with certain attacks that can do quite some damage. Um, yeah, I I think this boss could use more differences from high to low health. I think it could use a little more evolution in the boss's attacks, but overall, I think it's pretty cool. Doom is another immediate based peak tier. Power creep has hit this guy incredibly hard too because his health is actually relatively low, and so you can get him down to like 10% within like 6 minutes, within like 4 minutes of the boss starting, which is kind of sad because he's one of the most incredible designs. He's got the coolest lines in the game. He's got all these really cool mechanics. You need to have someone who's watching over the Reapers. You need to have someone taking the greens. You have a tank. You have people who kite. And usually there's some role intermixing there where you might have a green who's also a kiter or a green who's a tank. But these are also roles that DPS can do, and I think that's really cool. It adds a lot of complexity. There's a lot of these dangerous mechanics. Oh my god, the mechanic where you get split from your soul is so dope because like you need to think about where you're going to be pushed back to. So you need to be cognizant of your positioning as a body as a whole. You need to be cognizant of the pull in that he does. He's got cracks on the floor, so you need to be able to move quickly out of vision. Um, Dude, very cool fight. I'm just so bummed. Even with CM mode, it just gets burst so quick, and that sucks. But Doom is still incredible music, incredible design, and you'll often see um, when Ana gets a fight right, they really get it right. Like it'll be thematically dope, mechanically dope. Very, very infrequently do you see a boss that's a rock star in one thing but not another. Like I would say most of the time, now that I'm thinking about it, no, I was about to say how is Mersad Overseer better than like KC, but then I realized that KC is basically the same plight, where it's just the DPS golem. Anyways, as I was saying, when you think about it, a lot of these bosses in what's the word I'm looking for? Just all together are really quality um, to their tier. So I would say yeah, these two definitely stand out above the rest for sure. And it's very fitting that they're both the final bosses of their wings. And you'll notice that progression too. I keep going on tangents, but generally the scale of the boss fight will increase over the wing. I think one of the biggest counter examples of this is Wing 1, where I would argue it actually maybe decreases, or at the very least Gorseval and Veil Guardian are both definitely cooler than some Bandit, you know? So, sorry, Sabatha. CA, I'm not really a big fan of the gimmicks in this fight. I don't really like the orb collection phase because it's kind of janky. This is a holdover from Doom as well. One of the biggest weaknesses of that fight is just that orbs have a mind of their own sometimes, and your your hitbox can be wonky, and sometimes orbs will go through you. And that's also the case with CA, sometimes even more so because they move quite quickly. And so if you're a latency player, this is just like a very unfun fight for you. Um, Also, sometimes the hands kind of glitch out and you can't target them, and having to wield like the sword and the shield just it's a little janky to me. The ads as well, um, and I'm not really a big fan of a boss that doesn't move. So I don't know, a boss that doesn't move innately, not a boss that doesn't move because of tanking choices. Because I know that most bosses here, when you tank them correctly, generally don't move, but the structure type design of CA I'm not a big fan of. So yeah, I'm putting it in all right. Actually, dare I say it, it's kind of a drag. Sorry, I know there's some CA lovers, but yeah. Anyways, Twin Largos is goated. Controversial take it. This is the best raid in the game, and it's not even close, dude. Should I put a Twin Largos tier? I'm gonna put a Twin Largos tier. Let's do it. Wait, how do I add one? Okay, boom. Twin Largos tier, and then we're gonna give it a nice little like light blue design. Shout out the water. Okay, boom. Wait, and then I accidentally added a row here. Okay, boom. Yes, this is technological videos where I know exactly what I'm doing. Wait, what the hell? I just. Okay, give me a second. Okay, I'm back. I fixed everything. We're good. Let's get back to it. Twin Largos has awesome design. It has an incredible soundtrack. Go listen to the Twin Largos OST now. It is probably top 5 songs in the game, maybe even top 3. It's incredible, and it's very unique in its sound as well. It's got really cool mechanics, especially the phase where you have to split to the 2 different islands, and they're kind of linked to each other in terms of you have to kill one and the other very close to one another. It's reminiscent of the I phase in the Wing 5, and I just think it's really cool because I think 5-man content is innately more dangerous because there's less people to kind of pick you up when you fall. And I think it's a fight done really well. I love the invisibility. I love how they really stick to the lore of the Largos and how they're very quick, mobile, dangerous assassins. This is peak Guild Wars 2 for me. Every time I do Twin Largos, I crank the music up. I have the time of my life. And this is actually one of the rare moments, though, I will say, where the CM detracts from the fight. I'm sorry. The CM is innately less fun because I'm fighting the boss less. I'm jumping off the platform all the time, and it's just boring. I want to fight the boss. I want more mechanics on the stage, not jumping off the stage. You know what I mean? But that's getting ahead of myself. Um, Twin Largos, based tier, but above based actually, super based. Okay, Kadim 1. I hope that I got these in the right order. I'm pretty sure this is Kadim 1, yeah. Kadim 1 is pretty cool. Oh, where is it at? I would put it in base, but there's just as a normal player who doesn't have a specialized role, of which there's probably like 6 or 7 of you in the raid. Maybe I would say 6, because you have what? You have Lamp, you have Kite, and you have Matt Tank, Pat Tank. Um, so main tank and Pat Tank. If you're one of those 6, this is a really big slog because half the time you're just fighting these dumbass monsters that don't fight back on you because they're focused on the tank, and the other half of the time you're kind of like hitting Kadim or hitting like some fire imp and then hitting Kadim, and then you're running around killing Kadim. So if you're one of the specialized roles, especially Lamp, I think Lamp is really fun. This is probably like at the very least top of good or enjoyable. But if you're one of the non-specialized roles, you really feel how boring this fight is, and it's really bad because it's a rather lengthy fight, and a lot of these enemies have some pretty high health for how uninteractive they are, especially um, the wyverns and the hydra. I think the destroyer has some pretty cool mechanics, but I'm putting it in all right tier. I know that's controversial. If you're like if you're a kite or you're a um I think lamp is good. I think kite is good. I think the mad tanks are okay. If you're one of those, it's probably top of good or enjoyable, maybe even, based if you love lamp kiting, but to me, I just can't discount the fact that every other player has the most boring time, and so it's going to even out and be all right. Maybe even kind of a drag. We'll come back to it. Um, guys, I can't remember the names of these. I know this is Rock Lady and Air Lady, so we're gonna go with that. Rock Lady is a W. I think Rock Lady is base tier. I love the jumping puzzles. I love the pillar mechanic. I especially love in CM the parkour that comes innately with the pillars. Um, it's just a very fun, very fast. Actually, ooh, there is a lot of moments where you're just not hitting the boss. Now that I think about it, like the eye phase, like whenever she does her eye attack and you have to hide behind the pillar. If you're one of the pillar holders, this fight kind of sucks if you have high DPS because the amount of uptime on the boss that you have is very low because you're taking out pillars and then by the time you get back, you're 5% off the next pillar. It's really sad and annoying. So I would say I'd say top of enjoyable. I think this is a perfect fight below based and peak because there's some minor stuff that makes it a little less fun, but overall, very good fight. Air Lady, this fight sucks. I hate this fight so much. You have, I'm gonna be brutal here. You have a lot of janky jumps with the jumping pads that the air spirit elementals spawn. You have some janky mechanics like the one shot animation is kind of weird and not very weighty. And so, you know, how do I word this? I don't like the feeling of getting tornadoed up, even when it's intentional to escape the big move. And so that's just a moment where I'm not hitting the boss because I didn't choose Virtuoso or Hollowsmith, Scrapper, or Spellbreaker, I guess, with their heal as well. But I don't know. It just feels like if you're not picking one of the characters who can just survive the big attack, it's just very unfun when you're fighting. Is this Sabir? I think this is Sabir. Also, the phase where you have to get to the corners of the island. I just and when she pushes you back and all the long extended CC phases, it's just boring to me. I don't know. I don't know the fundamental difference between Adina and Sabir that makes Adina fun or the Earth Lady fun, but the Air Lady not fun when they kind of are similar in the manner of having to get off the boss to do a mechanic. But to me, they just feel fundamentally different, and so I can't put her too high. Um, QTP. Oh, this this is a crazy take. This might be pain, sorrow, agony tier. QTP to me is unfun because the mechanics themselves aren't that interesting to me. If you're a pylon kiter, you just bring a ranged build, you're supplied boons. Every 30 seconds, you use one of your utilities or two of your utilities to pick up a ball, and then you go back to rotating. If you're a DPS, you're literally just rotating, and then you CC a pillar every so often. If you are a tank, you're just dodging, the autos and not hitting your pylon behind you. And every 20%, you go drop something, and then the cycle repeats. It's just I don't know. I will say one thing that saves it is the three slam attack is really fun to learn. It's a very specific timing and movement. And so for that, that definitely gets bumped up a little. But honestly, guys, I'm looking at this tier list and I need a boss fight that goes in pain, sorrow, and agony tier. And I'm thinking this is the boss fight. It's boring, they use the same boss again, which I mean the storyline was dope or whatever, but like, come on. Um, the specialized roles in this instance, I would say, are even more boring than like the normal roles because you are isolated and you have like no utilities in your rotation because you're using them to get the ball. Um, and certain mechanics are ignorable because other mechanics just completely take care of them. And for that to happen in the most recent raid boss, that's just kind of unacceptable to me. I understand with years and years of um, power creep before this. In Gorseval, you will never dash off the platform again. I get that. But the fact that the Entropic, whatever dude, just gets completely murked by the lava and thus becomes one less mechanic in a fight that already doesn't have very many things for you to focus on, I'm not a fan of it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I will say, one of the coolest raid achievements is getting everyone naked in the hot tub in that arena. That's pretty dope. That's pretty dope. Gotta say that. So let's go ahead and see where we can fit these guys down here. This Spirit Run, this is kind of a W. This is I would say this is all right. This would be enjoyable if it weren't for the goop circle phase before this. I would say that the Spirit Run itself is enjoyable, and the goop phase is actually probably pain, sorrow, and agony tier. So I'm putting this bottom of all right to balance that out. Maybe top of kind of a drag, but we got to be optimistic here, guys. We want that beautiful bell curve overall, right? That means good statistics, right? Any scientists out there? I don't know. Um, the Bandit event. This is a major drag. This is pain and sorrow tier because the bandits have. Wait, no, that's not the bandit part of this, is it? That's Bandit Trio. Oh, guess what? That's also pain, sorrow, and agony tier because it's just waiting around for like 30 minutes. It's like 7 minutes, but power creep has hit this hard, and it already wasn't very fun at the beginning. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Bandit Run, and I don't really have more details to say. It's just kind of a bore. Um, Escort also pain, sorrow, and agony tier. You'll notice most of these events. I mean, some of these two in Wing 5 are pretty cool, but some of these events, I'm gonna spoil it. The gate for Wing 7 also pain, sorrow, and agony tier. Like, what the hell are we doing, guys? This is literally worse than if you just made the bosses take 5 minutes longer each. Because effectively, what you're doing is you are making the raid wing take 3 to 8 minutes longer, you know, inescapably, and you're also making the encounters less fun than the raid fight it was itself. So if you were to just make the bosses take longer, that would be a much better alternative, even if people don't want that anyways. So definitely some. We got the trio here actually. We got pain, sorrow, agony, and then we got the guy that represents all three of them. Um, River of Souls. I think it's all right. It's pretty. If you're one of the two in the back, it's pretty enjoyable to move everything. It's pretty cool movement, but nothing notable. And then let's see. So individually, we have Broken King. Um, I'd say he's pretty. I'd say he's pretty enjoyable. I think it's a fun dynamic to explode everyone, and you have one guy who's just like absolutely oonga boonging the Broken King, and so he's doing like 35k DPS, and everyone's like, "Yo, chill, bro! I have 3 stacks, and I'm about to freeze to death on this ball." And he goes, "Yeah, but my arc DPS logs." Broken Soul is probably like all right. It's to me it's kind of boring because you have to intentionally not kill the boss until you get the spider. Um, and then you can't see it, but this third one is the eye uh, event, and that one's pretty cool too. I like not having to do any CC. That actually kind of impacts your rotation for a lot of classes in a unique way, um, so you don't grief the group. So I would say maybe good, all right, and drag. So that would equal out to all right. And that is my normal raid tier list. I will cut back in a second to my finished CM tier list and explain that there. But thank you so much for watching so far, and I'll catch you in like half a second. Boom, boom, part two. Um, so I'm actually quite a CM enjoyer. So you'll notice that most of my ratings here, I might have missed one or two of these. Let me know in the comments. Um, most of my ratings are higher for the CMs than the average for the normal modes. And that's because I think that more difficulty, when done not horribly, is really enjoyable. Um, so let's go through this. I'll start from bottom to top, and guess what? There's a surprise Giga tier, okay? Where a fight that I haven't put yet is going to be the best of the best. And could it be one of these three? Well, statistically, most likely, yes, but it could also be one of, these five, maybe. Definitely not one of these four. So let's go. I already don't like CA, and I don't think the CM really saves it. It just adds some necessity for projectile protection, and otherwise adds Conjured Warriors, which are pretty dangerous. But guys, you could put a gun to my head, and I will never say this fight is fun. I don't know what it is, but It's the necessary evil to get to my favorite fight in the game, and I'll leave it there. Keep Construct CM. I kind of spoiled it before. It ultimately doesn't really change the fight from normal mode. The same opinions of this fight hold from normal mode to CM, and that is kind of a drag. Q1 CM is it's fun in that there's a lot of complexity and things you have to do, but the way that Q1 goes about adding difficulty to the fight, ultimately to me, just it doesn't the CM difficulty added doesn't really spice things up, if that makes sense. Um, I would say bouncing fireball is fun. The higher pressure on CC is fun. Making slublings a little bit harder is fun, but ultimately the CM doesn't really elevate the fight for me. It makes the it makes the parts of the fight that were already pretty strong stronger, but it doesn't address any of the weaknesses, and so I can't really elevate the fight too much. And that's why it hasn't really gone up any tiers. Same with the Air Lady. I like the reduced res rate. That's kind of a unique choice for them to make, but cool all the same. The added projectile protection is also cool, I guess, but as you know from the CA fight, that's not really something that alone gets me more interested in a fight because most of the time projectile protection is usually just handled by like your Ventari Revenants or maybe feedback spam from Mesmers. It's not necessarily a mechanic in which you actively have to respond to it, and so it's kind of uninteractive as a difficult measure to add. That is to say, if we were to traditionally do it like how it was done when it first came out and send a player over to kill them, that would be kind of a more difficult form of cannons, which is kind of interesting. But as it stands, not a crazy fan. Soulless horror, starting to get to the cool ones. I love the arena removal. Um, in fact, I don't think this is necessarily in order. Yeah, let's go here, here. Yeah, I was like, why is Soulless Horror below all these guys? I think this is. Mm, there we go. Okay, so we'll go top to bottom here because I was already talking about it. Soulless Horror is cool because it removes the arena, and that's a really unique mechanic that really makes things more intense. And I love that. But otherwise, it doesn't do terribly too much more. But it's very, very cool for that matter. Samurog, dope. I love the difficulty that people had learning this fight initially, having to map out the arena and having all these dang spikes all over the place that would come surge at you. That was so dope. Just a really cool fight. Been kind of power crept, but I loved how much theory crafting went into the completion of this fight. Um, and whoa, I just realized Deimos is up here. I'm sorry, Deimos is going down here. Um, but we'll get to that in a second. Twin Largos, like I said before, the CM doesn't really necessarily impact the fight too much. It's just kind of like moments where you're not on the fight. But I think just the added lethality to a fight that's already so cool is definitely really appreciated. Such a great fight design, as I said before. Um, Favorite fight in the game on normal mode. MOCM is the fight that I think does movement requirements best. Is that fair to say? Or it's definitely in the upper echelon of movement requirements in fights because it does the most important thing possible, and that's making players make serious choices frequently in a fight. Serious choices with serious ramifications. That's not to say it's making you make difficult choices. Most of the time, when you see the mechanic of a blue square on top of or near spikes, it's fundamentally easy to understand if you look at it on paper, but the fun is that it's complex within the fight itself. So if you didn't know, whichever one shows up first, unless they're like really close to one another, the one that shows up first will trigger first, and you will have enough time to dodge roll out of the other one. Or dodge roll into the other one. So if you see spikes first and then blue comes up a second later, you can wait for the spikes to go off and then go into blue. Or if it's too tight, you can look for another blue. There's always a different one. If you see blue and then spikes first, that's a little bit easier. You stand until the blue pops and roll out, or like before, you look for another blue. Those are both great options, and it's a very, very fun fight. However, the reason this isn't higher because the CM does add a lot of fun is because the base fight itself isn't that fun. And so even though you add this really cool movement game, I'm still not a big fan of the fact that it's ultimately still a DPS golem just with more steps now. So it's good, it's enjoyable, but it's not above these fights. Um, Cairn adds a really cool complexity to the rotation, I would say, in that what was once a really good movement skill for you to use is now removed from you because you have to be using it constantly. So not necessarily removed, but kind of limited in a sense because you might not have it whenever a celestial circle goes off. Um, However, I know some people could test this by saying it's just annoying having to have a button on repeat constantly every 10 seconds. It's just another force movement to add to your rotation. But the way I view it, it definitely makes the hard parts of Cairn harder in a very fun way. In that, what was once, kind of a get out of jail free card with the sack, where you're on a green square with someone or a green circle, and you sack out of it so that they don't get agony once it pops. You now have to think about if you sack into it to kind of trigger your passive, so you don't jettison off the arena. Um, you might be stuck there giving them agony for a second after. I like this a lot. I think it's chaotic, and I think it's chaotic in a fun way, and that's why it's so high. Deimos power creep has like annihilated this for me. Ultimately, it's like very similar to the normal fight. If you've done a normal fight and you have someone who can provide decent Aegis, you're pretty much fine for the Deimos fight. Um, I don't know, dude. I love the normal fight so much. I don't think the CM really fundamentally changes much. So maybe you just have like a Guardian brings what is it? Advance, and then you have a ranger brings stone spirit, and all of a sudden you're covered. So bummer. Um, Dude, I knew that one of these two is going to be above the other. I want to have a surprise Giga tier. I actually think I might remove it, or maybe I'll just yeah. These two CM fights are actually leagues above the others for me. So your actual surprise is that it's not one boss fight, it's two that are Giga. But I love what both of these do so much. Doom is a perfect example of how one mechanic can completely reshape the fight. When you are in normal mode, your positioning in relation to your team is extremely important. Some people need to go off of the group to get greens. Many people have to go off of the group because they're afflicted and they need to drop the bomb. Lots of people will be running away from each other because of cracks on the floor or because of the chains that link them together. These are very important mechanics that make you want to do a certain movement innately. The CM complicates this because you now have to watch your movement in the position of the Ender's Echo at all times. And so when you see a chain with someone else next to you, your first instinct cannot just be to run away from them. Your first instinct should be to locate the Echo and then run away, permitting that the Echo doesn't hit you. That is such a cool way to add nuance to every single mechanic in the fight. While keeping it relatively simple. And the thing is it doesn't like shit on you if you fail the mechanic. There is still potential for your ability to save yourself here if you have a team with a lot of CC. It just makes things a lot more hectic. And in a fight like Doom, where your attention on mechanics is very important to not mess up, a little bit of spice that you add to it goes a long way. I especially love that this does not go away during the last 10%. I love the fact that you have to be on your toes in a phase where in the normal mode you're pretty much through and through because the normal mode version is very simple once you get to 10%. The Ender's Echo makes stuff a lot more complicated when you get there though because you have to go out and get the seal. But what if the dude is running at you during the seal and you're taking DOT damage in the field? It's really awesome. I love it. It has been power crept pretty hard, and you can mark the echo and make it a lot easier to keep track of. However, I still love it. Adina is like the most fun CM in the game, I would say, solely because everyone has had this moment when you're training Adina where the fight starts and she breaks the barrier or the pillar, and people are like, okay, I'm gonna go run on Adina and hit her, and they run right into the sand and die. Um, One of the biggest weaknesses of the normal mode Adina fight is that it's more a nuisance than anything to fall in the sand because you get 8 seconds of blindness, which does not feel good as a player. In fact, during my normal mode training, um, because I train people on Adina a lot because it's just my favorite fight on that wing, and so it's like my favorite to teach in the POF raids besides Twin Largos. people were like, dude, I wish they would just kill me. I'm so sick of being blinded because I feel worse than dead. Because I'm sitting here and I'm hitting her and I'm putting in effort and I'm getting nothing back. And I say, like, dude, just you wait, okay? If we progress enough, you'll get your wish because we'll go to CM. And guess what? If you fall, you die. And that makes the split phases, which were initially a little weaker during the fight, a lot more intense because you're gonna have to be jumping on pillars like a jumping puzzle mid fight. You have to pay attention to where you put the pillars. There's a lot more damage pressure during the split phases. It's overall just a really fun fight. The CM changes really add on to the core concepts of the fight, and it's just really fun. When you think about a good fight, you think about something that makes you have fun. And I have had more fun moments in CM Medina than any other raid with people because people just forget about the pillar and just die. And that alone has encompassed more fun than like the entirety of my experience with QTP, normal, and CM mode. And same with like these two and these two. It's just a really fun mechanic. So thank you guys for sticking with my rambling. Next video will be strikes, and thank you for watching. I'm excited.